Myth number 9, self-reg is the theory. So your work, your body of work is the science and the theory. Well, other programs out there will show you how to do it. And this is a challenging one, because this is part of the reason we moved away from what we coin as one-offs, which is you go out and do a 2-hour keynote or an hour and a half keynote and then leave. And then what happens is people go out and buy. They're very inspired and see the hope and all of those things, and then they go and buy a program to figure out how to do it, and they don't realize it's two different things, right? So how do we address this one?
You know, in a way, this goes back to myth number 8. I actually see Self-Reg as being the anti-program, if there is such a thing.
It is.
And the reason is because Self-Reg is a process. And it's a process of learning. It's a process of understanding. And it's a never-ending process. You go deeper and deeper as you begin to reframe things that you thought you already understood. The problem with programs is that they really are regimented. I mean, that's the essence of a program. And that in itself is an obstacle to the kind of reflective thinking that's required to be constantly learning, to be constantly questioning something that you may have thought you already understood, but there's no end to that process. And there is no such a thing as fidelity. You could not measure fidelity for Self-Reg.
Yeah, no.
But there's no such a thing as a program unless you're measuring fidelity.
And when you start measuring fidelity, you actually change the nature of what you're
change it
doing,
completely.
because that becomes that's always been my issue with
Yes.
assessments, and
Mine
being
too.
very careful how we choose them. And when you're trying to measure things, it's like that can change what you're focusing on. We really can. I love this idea of the anti-program.
Yeah.
Do I keep thinking, I did research in and had a big interest in resilience. And it's like saying that resilience is a program. It's like, I don't know if that's a good example, but we talk about a lot around inclusion, and self-reg is a method. It's how to work, in these areas, but thinking of it as a program is limiting as well. And that can be really problematic.
I remember I did that big job in Ireland.
Yeah.
And so they had bought a big program. And I won't mention which one it was. And they arranged for me to meet with the founder, the guy who designed that program.
Yeah.
And the results that they received from their first 2 years were really, really disappointing. In fact, not only had they not made progress, they'd actually gone backwards.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget him saying to me, well, that's because they didn't do it right.
Yeah.
And that's one of the most wonderful things about Self-Reg, because there is no such a thing as doing it right or wrong. And what happens is, even when you think you're doing it badly, you're learning. And so what we've seen is, even with our novices, the insights that come almost immediately are profoundly important, and they just keep on getting better and better as you practice and as you go deeper.
And it's that mindset of looking at a process too.
It's
so
the mindset of looking at
that's
process.
why it always works, but you have to stay in the process. You have to be always asking why now. You're doing
That's
your stress
exactly right.
detective. You're
Good.
constantly reframing. And so I always,
That's good.
I often hear people will ask me, okay, but the people who there's a lot of natural self-reggers out there, and then we add the science, they learn more, they go deeper. It's still very much propels them to the next level. Like, this is what it did for me. But I came into it as somebody that this resonated right away. Well, I get asked about what about for the folks it doesn't. And then sometimes people will say, well, they're the ones that need programs. But I think it does the opposite, right?
I've got to tell you a wonderful story.
Yeah.
When we were starting this off, as you know, I just wrote that thing for Principal Connection.
Yeah.
And so we were starting off in BC, and this was absolutely volunteer only.
Yeah.
And so we were in one school, and this was in West Van, and there was a veteran teacher, and she came to the sessions just kind of curious, and asked one of those questions that was along the lines, "This is awful. I've done so many programs. I'm not doing another program." Anyways, so, I just said, well, you do this, if you want. And so she left, she stormed out. And so she was peeking
Yeah.
into the other classrooms, seeing the changes that were happening, seeing the changes, most importantly, that were happening in the teachers that were
Yeah.
doing this. So she finally, after a couple of months of watching all this, decided she'd just try a little bit. She became one of our most ardent champions of
Isn't
self-reg, but
that
that's not the
neat?
only time that's happened. But with programs, I've never seen that.
Yeah.
What happens is it seems to breed frustration,
Yeah.
stress.
Reminds me of the teacher she was in our courses, and she took our courses because she had to. She was told by in a good way. This was a group that was going through. They were social emotional consultants, and they all wanted to bump that up to self-reg, and so they went through as a group of 10 or 12. And it really had lovely impacts. Anyway, she told me through the courses that if we wanted anyone to ever speak about, does self-reg work, she would do it, because she did a study. She set it up herself. She said, I was going to show that this didn't work, and I did all of the things that Shanker guy said to do. That's what made her. There's background. This is what made her come to the courses. I did all that stuff that Shanker guy said to do, and all the things around the, I'd set up my classroom in a different way, and I thought about my relationships in a different way, and I responded to, misbehavior in a different way, and I was so upset it worked. So that's kind of neat,
That's a
right?
great story.
I mean, obviously she had to have the spirit of it, or it wouldn't
That's
have worked,
great.
because you and I both know that you can change. You can put some tennis balls underneath some shoes,
Yeah.
desks bringing us, a pedal bike or whatever, and it's not enough, right?
Yeah.
But clearly.
I love it.
Yeah.
Not the only time either.
Yeah. And I want this biggest takeaway. Self-reg is all you need. The 5 steps. The 5 steps, and that includes the 5 domains. That it truly, truly is all you need. And so if there's something inside of you that says, I want to do this, but I don't know how, and you're looking for things elsewhere, I strongly suggest you dive deeper into self-reg.
Yes.
You take courses, but there's all kinds of ways. There's whole YouTube channel filled with stuff. There's all kinds of info sheets. Dive deeper into it, because your understanding has to deepen more. Because once you do that, you won't ask that question anymore. That's my feeling anyway.
Yes, I agree.
So.